Mr. Speaker, as I rise to second this very important motion, I must register my disappointment because of the time that it has taken for us to be able to deal with this matter. We investigated this matter over a year ago, and I believe my colleagues who signed this report, because during the signing of the report, I happened to have been far, signed this report sometimes in March, earlier this year. After the investigation, after we carried out the work and we did the report writing. Mr. Speaker, as I rise to support this motion, I have to note the following observations, which are very key. One, we observed clearly during our investigation that procurement laws were flouted 100%. And this did not only originate from KEMSA, but from the Ministry of Health. Mr. Speaker, there was evidence to suggest that the entire mess originated from the Ministry of Health, where there were clear directives being given by the public, by the PS, to the board as well as the management of KEMSA, which led to them tapping into money which has been set aside for UHC for them to be able to place in orders. Mr. Speaker, this COVID crisis in this country really exposed the Ministry of Health. It exposed an institution, a state corporation, which for many years had been operating without any major scandals, got them to start thinking, how do we create COVID billionaires? Mr. Speaker, what happened during the KEMSA scandal is something which we will regret for the rest of our lives. We will regret because instead of putting lives first, people went there to put their bellies first. These are people who did not care about children in Narok who would be exposed to COVID. They did not care about children in Trans Nzoia, children in Mombasa, or even children in Samburu. All they cared is on how they can be able to get to the procurement, get into the procurement, and then hike the prices of PPEs, which were things which were essential to be able to prevent Kenyans from contracting this deadly virus. Mr. Speaker, when we sat here and listened to both the board and the management, those are the days when I actually came to believe that there are people who do not value humanity at all. There are people who it is only their way or the highway. There are people who believe that the only way to survive in this country is by lining your own pocket in the expense of poor Kenyans. Mr. Speaker, during our investigation into this matter of KEMSA, what shocked me was that without any budget, the KEMSA Management Board, as well as the management, would give people commitment letters and tell them, go ahead and import billions of shillings worth of PPEs at whatever price. And then when they land here, we'll be able to pay you. And they have no money because we know what happens. KEMSA, being an NGO that depends on money that is given a budget by the Ministry of Health. Once they're given a budget of the Ministry of Health, county governments, because of the KEMSA Act, put in their focus demand, or rather, even they request, they order products, and then they end up paying for them. But in this case, we know how much that money was. It was not in billions. But when it came to COVID-19, There were donations which were being given. Those donations ended up being sold, Mr. Speaker. There were money allocated, and they also got an opportunity to tap into the UHC money, which was set aside for children in our country who have never had a chance to be able to get any medical support, can be able to do so. This is one of President Uhuru Kenyatta's Big Five agenda, UHC. And this is hypocritically is what we are now pushing so fast to ensure that we pass the NHIF bill very soon, so that at least people can be able to get access to this. I wonder, Mr. Speaker, if we do not prosecute, because the recommendations are very clear here. There are individuals whom we found culpable. We found them that they had already put their fingers into the cookie jar. We named individuals, and they are named here in this report. This is a public document, and anyone out there can be able to get it. We named the former MD, Mr. John Amanjari, whom we recommend that he be investigated. We also named the legal officers for them to be investigated with possible prosecution, and we give timelines. I wonder, Mr. Speaker, when we take a whole year to be able to adopt a report, whether the timeline that we gave, because in these recommendations, we gave a period of 1 month for it to be implemented. So I'm wondering if, for instance, Mr. Speaker, I'll read one of the recommendations that we gave. The first one was that the ODPP and the DCI investigate the CEO KEMSA and the Board of Management of KEMSA for contravening the following provisions of the law. One is Article 226 of the Constitution, read together with Section 44(2) of the PPADA, Section 44 and 45, 3D of the PPADA. We go all the way to Section 48, Section 53, Section 53, and then now the actor is very clear, is the ODPP and the DCI. Timeline, Mr. Speaker, is 1 month. And who is responsible because we do not have an implementation committee? Is a committee on health. How do we then, Mr. Speaker, after March, when we adopted this report, now at the end of the year, when KEMSA is now threatening to fire all the 922 employees because they have come up with new things, they are saying, no. We have a blotted workforce. You know, we are supposed to have only 383 employees as per SCAC guidelines. But now we have 922. We need to fire them all instead of them looking at the rot. Mr. Speaker, one of the funny things that we had the other day when we were meeting with the KEMSA board is that for a hospital in Kwale to order drugs from KEMSA, the delivery period is 616 days. That is over almost 2 years. I don't know whether they'll be walking, because if I walk from Nairobi to Kwale, the maximum it will take me, Mr. Speaker, is a month. So I don't know whether they'll be going at snail pace to be able to deliver this medicine, and whether this medicine will even be able to work. So, Mr. Speaker, I think we are jokers in this country. You know, we have a crisis. We as a Senate, spend taxpayers' money to come up with these recommendations. We didn't spend our own money. We went to Mombasa, and we went to a retreat, and we drafted this recommendation. We sat here, we exchanged bitter words with KEMSA board, the ministry, because of the rot there. And all we're trying to do is to try to find out the truth, because we swore to defend the Constitution. But guess what happened, Mr. Speaker? Even instead of the DPP and the DCI following up and saying, so long as the report has been tabled, even if it has not been adopted, let us move fast. They just dilly-dally. And then, to add insult into injury, what do? The president comes in and gives them 21 days and say, make sure everyone who is responsible is held accountable. Mr. Speaker, I wonder whether this report will be meaningful. Now that the mandate has changed or the goalpost has shifted, it is no longer following all those who robbed this country, billions of shillings, all those who caused the huge scandal. It is now simply, let us send them all home. Meanwhile, we have dead stock of products which were bought worth billions, Mr. Speaker, that can never be sold. A mask, which now costs about 30 shillings, that time was being sold for how much? 900 shillings. It is there. And what did we get? What did we hear when we were going through this investigation? That we were being held hostage by the suppliers. Give me a break. How does a supplier hold you hostage? It is lack of accountability that led to this. So, Mr. Speaker, I do hope that someone somewhere out there will want to be counted as somebody who believes that Article 226 was not just drafted by the framers of the Constitution for the sake of it. This Parliament did not just pass the laws to make sure that we call for accountability for the sake of it. Otherwise, all these parliamentary meetings will just be a place where we can go and earn some allowances. So, Mr. Speaker, this is one of the investigations that really annoyed me, because I could see clearly that KEMSA, the people in KEMSA, who belong to jail, did not care. And it was very clear that they are not acting alone. They are acting with some very, very senior people who are untouchable in this country. So if we are really calling for change and we believe everything that we say, and we respect the president,
Senator Ochila Ayako, on a point of order.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this is a country where there is no secrecy, and this House should not have secrecy. Would I be in order to request and plead with my outspoken brother to name these untouchable people who are interfering with the public affairs, so that we join him in dealing with these people?
Senator Ledama, you're required to substantiate the matter, and if not, I bring you to the attention of Standing Order 100, responsibility for the statement of fact.
Mr. Speaker, I'll be glad to do that. Mr. Speaker,
proceed.
The fact that the recommendation for this House have directed the ODPP and the DCI to investigate these individuals, and until today they have not been investigated, will lead me to conclude that the persons who are being investigated are very powerful, that they cannot be touched. So when I made my submission and I made it very clear, and I'll repeat what I said, that it will lead you to conclude that those who were in charge of KEMSA, the reason why they have not been prosecuted until today is because we are dealing with people who are very powerful and that cannot be touched in this country. How do you explain the fact that the president says 21 days conclude the investigation, and until today they have not been concluded? So I don't have a problem with my good friend and colleague, the engineer, former Cabinet Secretary of Energy, Senator of Migori, and hopefully the future Governor of Migori, for asking me to substantiate. But what I said is that the fact that these investigations have not been carried out will lead me to conclude that they are dealing with very powerful people who cannot be touched. Because in a country where we respect the rule of law, when you're given 21 days, you should prosecute. You must prosecute. So, Mr. Speaker, I believe I have substantiated. Before I conclude, because this is a matter which really gets me the wrong way, is that one of the recommendations which was made by my committee, which also required 1 month, was that the ODPP and the DCA investigate companies set out in Annex 2 of this report. And everyone is invited to come in and get a copy of the report. This is a public document. That were awarded tenders by KEMSA to determine if there was any collusion between the CEO of KEMSA and the Board of Management of KEMSA and the directors of the companies in contravention of the PPADA and the PFM Act. And I cannot see what is written there. And actually, I'll just maybe summarize what is written there. And prosecute. We're given 1 month. I hope now, ODPP and DCI, you will come and get some material from this report. It is a bit hypocritical for the KEMSA board now to come and have a meeting with the Senate Health Committee and say, we're being held hostage by suppliers. You are being held hostage. This committee that investigated this matter has recommended the DPP and the DCI to then go and follow these companies, the suppliers, and find out this hostage, what it means. Why are you being held hostage? One thing which was a laughing matter, Mr. Speaker, when we had a meeting with the new KEMSA board, which when you listen to them, they have no clue what is happening. In fact, their focus is on an HR audit, but not on the truth. In fact, if you listen to them, Mr. Speaker, you'll end up concluding that the reason why this staff were being sent home is so that the truth will never come out as to what happened last year that led to the COVID billionaires. Mr. Speaker, as I conclude, it is important that this House review the existing regulations to provide for an elaborate framework for the conduct by procuring entities to emergencies procurement, and in particular, the implementation of Section 103 of the PPADA Act by procuring entities. This is a matter that now behooves us in Parliament and also the ministry to be able to look at what is happening. Because I have to say this, I'm a little bit skeptical of the militarization in this country. Because the moment you bring in the military, you're actually saying bye-bye to procurement laws. Because they will do whatever they want to do. Furthermore, it's the military. You know? I believe that the military of this country has done a very good job. And I hope that instead of bringing in the military to take over KEMSA, we can prosecute those who caused companies, because I'm sure there are innocent people who supplied to KEMSA. But today, Mr. Speaker, one of the things that pains me the most is when you hear that KEMSA owes suppliers 6.8 billion shillings. You know? And it's also owed quite a lot of money by county governments. I want to request county governments, since we come here to fight for you to get money, and Treasury releases the monies on time, please pay KEMSA what it's owed to them. So that at least, instead of 616 days to fill an order rate, or for you to be able to deliver drugs to Kilifi, you can deliver them in a month's time. Mr. Speaker, with those few remarks, I beg to second.